Syllabus, even for those that having last semester, I've made changes. Okay, I change every semester as far as requirements and how we're going to do things a little bit, numbers and that kind of stuff. So, of course, Blackboard. I don't print syllabus or anything, so everything you need is on Blackboard. So what I'll do is I'm going to quickly, I hate kind of going back and forth on this, so I'm going to quickly just kind of run through the syllabus, and then we'll go to Blackboard and look at the requirements. So when it talks about the quizzes and discussions, things like that, I'll just go kind of talk about it and then go to Blackboard and look at them there, okay? So I'll just pull up the syllabus as a Word doc here. Let's see. I forgot you got to save it. Okay. All right, so of course I am Dr. Dobbs. This is Course History 202. So it's a continuation of 201, but if you haven't had 201, it's okay. I'm going to jump into a little background today on the end of 201 was, of course, many would say the kind of pivot point of American history, one of the most significant events in American history, the Civil War. And so we'll do a little background on the Civil War and then jump ahead from that point on. The best way to communicate with me about this class is Blackboard. Okay, Blackboard message. Because that way, again, I'm no longer a division chair. Woohoo! Anyway, I'm no longer division chair. I stepped down last semester, did my time, as they say. I was paroled early. No, I'm just kidding. So I've added some classes. So I've got a lot of classes, a lot of students. I think 250 some odd students, give or take. So if you email me and say, hey, what we do in this class? Of course, number one, I'm going to, don't start a message to me with, hey, that ain't my name, right? And I'm going to say, who the hell are you and what class are you in, okay? But if you send me a Blackboard message, even if you're disrespectful, which I probably won't answer you anyway, I'll say some smart-ass thing back to you and say, learn how to address somebody, and then I'll maybe answer you. But anyway, if you send me a Blackboard message, at least I know what class you're in, okay? So if you say, hey, Dr. Dobbs, how you doing? You have to do a whole big thing, but at least say, address me. That's a little lesson. I know on soapboxes. The older I get, I kind of morph into my dad more and more. And he was a Marine colonel. He used to scare the hell out of me, when I was a young kid. But I was telling somebody yesterday, I think I'll probably see you guys that have my class already. You'll hear stories multiple times. Just still kind of laugh and make me feel good, okay? So when I was a kid, I remember some restaurant and some poor waiter came up and said, "Hey, Bud, what can I get for you?" My dad said, "Well, number one, my name's not Bud." So you can call me sir, you can call me mister, you can call me colonel, but you sure something gonna call me Bud or something like that. He's like, oh, okay. But actually, my dad gave him a really good tip at the end. So anyway, just a little lesson there. Anyway, so the best way to communicate is Blackboard message, okay? Because then I know for sure. So give me some time. I check this all the time. It's up. Blackboard is up all the time in the office. It's got a little thing that pops up when there's a message that comes in. So I will usually answer those, for sure that day. If you don't, for some reason, you don't hear from me into the next day, that means either, y'all can find me in the obituary or something happened, okay? Because I'm going to usually answer messages. So then you can email me or call. You can call anytime. I check messages all the time, so I try to respond all the time, okay? Now, again, I'm always, one of the things they pay me to do is answer questions. But I will ask you, please, if you have a question about the class, first look at the syllabus, okay? Always look at announcements. I will announce the crap out of you. I mean, I send announcements all the time. I send reminders. I send clarifications. Because I can tell you on the front end, I worked hard on my syllabus and my dates and everything, but I guarantee you there's going to be a few mistakes. I'm ADD. I don't like details. I don't like, so I mess things up. So there'll be corrections. There might be some changes in dates and due dates and that kind of stuff. So always check your announcements, okay? But if you have a question, check first the syllabus. If you don't understand, then of course feel free to communicate with me, okay? Mr. Williams is now our division chair, so if you can't, if you're fed up with me or don't get the answer you like, which is fine. I mean, I'll say no a lot of times, but then you go to him, okay? The course description, like I said, it is just a continuation of 201. And we'll go up through, I try to get up through at least into the 70s, which I know is ancient history for you guys, but up through Vietnam and so forth. It's just harder to get anything more recent, don't have time, but also anything within the last 50 years, we don't necessarily have documents released for it. So it's more journalism than history. We don't really In the government typically, which is going to be interesting to see what happens going forward, because I don't know how they're going to, you know, handle tweets and things like that as our new government policy. But moving forward, secret documents are released generally about 50 years after the fact. Usually everybody's dead, so they can't be tried and put in prison, stuff like that. And so some things are released earlier, like there were documents released on Kennedy's assassination that were released earlier, or different controversial kind of things. But generally speaking, historians or regular people, we don't get access to some of the secret government documents for decades after the fact. That's just the kind of, you know, to protect people or whatever. So anyway, we'll get up through at least to the Vietnam, hopefully. These are the student learning outcomes. Again, we'll do at least 2, probably 3 assignments that'll be geared specifically toward assessing student learning outcomes. Two short essays, and probably at the end the extra point little quiz thing at the end like we did last time. That'll be 2 of them will be assignments, and maybe something else in class here and there too as well. All right, let me just run through the assignments real quick, and this is how everyone's going to make an A. Okay, I'm for you. I support you. I'm your biggest fan. I want everybody in here to make an A. You know, and so this is the way you do it. All right, a good sized chunk of the course grade, of course, comes from exams. Okay, and we'll go through this on Blackboard in a minute, but again, and remember the 4 exams you'll have to use Lockdown, Browser, and Monitor. Okay, I test online. Nothing else requires Lockdown, Browser, and Monitor. I had somebody from a class yesterday that after I said that over and over again, that's the only things you have to use Lockdown Browser. And then they called me and said, you know, I was trying to take that review quiz on Lockdown Browser. I said, no, you know, anyway. So you have to have that. Now again, if you you can use the library here. If you have webcam at home, whatever. And we'll talk later the next week or 2 about the practice quiz. Even if you've done it before, like last semester, it's always good to download the newest version and to go ahead and do the little practice test. But the exams are based on the list of terms. I'll show you under study tools. Those are the terms that I'll lecture on. Most of them I will cover in lecture, not all. So it's a combination of terms and list of, and notes on the terms when I lecture. Because if I talk about a term, then that's pretty much, you know, you're going to be expected to know that information. And then also the review quizzes, the objective quizzes that I'll show you, those things are great study aids as well. Okay, the exams are mostly factual. In other words, who's a person, you know, what they do and why the hell are we talking about them, you know, 100 years later or whatever. I don't ask you any dates. Everybody's had my class can vouch for that. I never ask you, you know, what date did something happen. I had a professor who did that, you know, scarred me. Okay, trying to remember all these. So anyway, so again, it's more about who, you know, if it's a person, who are they, what they do, what's significant about them, why are we talking about them, and a lot of times it's just one little factoid thing you'll need to know. Okay, others of them obviously are more. There may be lots of things you'll know about different people. I mean, we'll talk about the Eisenhower, you know, there's someone like Eisenhower or I'm drawing a blank now. You know, Lincoln, obviously, here in a little bit. Won't talk that much about Lincoln, but anyway, but they're mostly factual. Okay. Now, and again, I've got set up in the outline or in the calendar. I'm targeting right now the first exam to be February 1st to 4th. That's the plan. Okay. So I'll go through, I'll kind of have it broken down by week. So all your assignments are due per week. We'll talk about that in a second. And then the plan is once I finish covering what I'm going to cover in lecture through activities and different things. And then right now my plan is to have that exam. And the way I do it, since it's open online, I usually open it on Thursday, sometime during Thursday, and you have until Sunday night to take it. So sometime during that period of time, you need to get a good internet connection and have the webcam and so forth and go in and take the exam. Okay, they usually most people finish them since they're multiple choice. I mean, it usually takes anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes or so. I give you at least a full hour, and even I put in there, if you happen to run over a little bit, that's okay, just finish it, then just let me know and I have to go in and submit it for you. But so I'm not a real stickler on the time, as long as you've done the environment check and I know you're not getting any help or you don't have any, because again, these are closed note, closed books exams. So just like if you were sitting here and I was watching you, okay? All right, so the exams are 400 points, or up to 400 points, and I do typically scale, especially the first exam. Last semester, I think I scaled all of them, some depend on the class a little bit, but that's 400 points that you can earn. The other thing, everything else is open book, open note. Do it at home, do it on your own. So there's really no excuse for not doing the rest of this. Okay, that's why I would just drill into my son in particular. It's like you should never, if it's something like homework kind of stuff or like assignments like these. I mean, I'm giving you hundreds of points. Here, have points, and it just kills me, drives me nuts. Every semester we go, nah, it's okay. I'm trying to cut back on points. I don't want to be too tacky. Maybe make a B or a C. I don't want to have an A. I'm like, come on, guys. Here, if you just put the time and effort into it, it's open note, open book. Get help if you need to. I mean, do your own work. And when the writing stuff, we'll talk about second discussion and the essays. I'm a stickler about that. Do your own work, okay? But I mean, so anyway, chapter reading quizzes. Now this time it's just going to be the objective quizzes, not the short answer quizzes, okay? So we'll go over that in a minute. You can earn up to what I count is 140 points. You can actually earn 150. There's 15 chapters, 10 points each. So there's a little room there for some extra points. I'll count. If you go up to 150, I'll count it. But I'm only counting 140 required. So that gives you a little leeway if you miss a few questions, or even if you missed a chapter for some reason. Okay, didn't submit it or forgot or whatever. Okay, so 140 points possible, but you could earn up to 150 in that. Okay, essay questions. There'll be two 30-point essays. For those who had me last semester, we had the one 20-point essay at the end. It's going to basically be exactly like that. I'm just counting at 30 points this time. So I'll have a rubric you go by. I'll tell you exactly what you need to know. One of them is going to be, both of them will be primary document type essays, but I'll provide the documents. I'll tell you exactly what you need to know. And for the lecture classes, we will probably talk about it a little bit more than we do for the online classes. Okay. And then lastly, discussion. So in place of the set of the short answer reading quizzes I did the last couple semesters, we're going to have a discussion for every chapter. Okay. So again, this one is worth up to, it's 150 points. Okay. So that's 10 points per chapter. So I already have the discussions posted. And the biggest thing, and I'll get to that in a minute. So you put the time and effort into this, and again, they shouldn't take that long, but it's essentially from the text. These questions, they'll either be straight from the text, or I'll have a reference of some document that you need to look at, or sometimes I'll maybe put a little short video in there that you need to watch and then discuss. Okay, but it's about 100 words or so, so a good paragraph or so. Okay, now the first one is a class introduction. Okay, even though this is an online class, we're in class together. We don't have time, and I'm sure you guys wouldn't really, a lot of you wouldn't like it very much. So I said, okay, everybody stand up and introduce yourselves. It'll take a while. So you'll go to class discussion and introduce yourself. I'll give you 10 points for that. Okay, so technically on discussion, you could earn 160 points. All right, if you get the full credit for every chapter and the class discussion. But I'm only going to count 150. See, there's an opportunity there for some extra points in both of those. Okay. And then the last thing, and this is wrong, of course, supposed to be, this must be my online thing. Wait a second. Yeah, this is, hold on a second. Sorry, this is, let me pull up another, let me pause here. The participation actually for our class, the number is going to be 100 points instead of 50 points. That I accidentally had the online, see, I told you I already made a mistake. I accidentally had the online, let me see, maybe I had this one right. No, it's, or did I just pull up the wrong class? That may, no, okay, I just have the wrong syllabus in there. So there where it says participation and activities, 50 points, that's for the online class. For us, it'll be 100 points, okay? So the bulk of those participation points will be, probably half will be quizzes, okay? So the way that works, for those of you who haven't had my class, whatever terms, for instance, if I cover whatever terms I cover today, which I'm going to cover some terms and lecture some. So whatever I cover today, when we come back in, this is a Tuesday, Thursday class, right? Okay. So when we come back in Tuesday, you're responsible for whatever I covered in lecture today. Okay. And the way that works, I'd get you to, I could either do it. I may try to do it some electronically with Kahoot or some Polar Anywhere kind of thing, or one of the online apps, or just old school, take out a sheet of paper. Okay. And I'd ask you a question, and the answers would be one of the terms that I covered. All right. So if I said, who was the vice president took over for when Lincoln was assassinated, and fought the radicals in Reconstruction, then you'd answer. The answer would be Andrew Johnson, because he's going to be on the term, one of the list. If I don't give a quiz Tuesday, then if I give a quiz Thursday, you're only responsible for what we covered Tuesday. Okay, so just every day, if you'll just look over the terms we covered, all right, and because it's usually no more than 5 or 6, sometimes a little bit more if I'm going really fast, but usually 5, 6, 7 ish terms. Just look over those before you come into class, or the night before, the morning before, and know that I have to be able to recognize what this thing is, or who this person is. Okay, and the others will be activities, will be discussions, will be some for 202. We have access to some better kind of especially around World War II. I have some activities that I've used in the past. Some what would you do kind of thing, situations. We'll do that throughout. So there'll be some activities that we do. Now I'm only going to count 100 points. I think last semester I did 130. I'm going to count 100 points. There'll be an opportunity to make more than that. I'll probably give 7 or 8 at least quizzes, and could give more. Okay, and then I'll give activities as well for you to earn points for participation while we're in class. So there may be a chance to earn upwards of 150 points for the participation. Okay. Now I'm not going to let you count all of that for extra points, but I may let there be another cushion of about 10 points or so in there for extra points. So if you're here every day and you take all the quizzes and you do well and you do all the activities and everything, then like I said, you'll probably have upwards of 150 points earned, and I'll let some of that count as extra points. Okay. But I'm only going to count 100 because, again, I know sometimes stuff happens. I just heard on coming into work this morning, the flu is particularly bad this year. Lots of people have died. I think I heard recently there was a adjunct who taught up at Sneed, that young guy, like closer to your age than my age, died of the flu apparently a couple weeks ago, or a week or so ago. So if you're sick, don't come. Okay, I'll work with you. Okay. So if you got a fever and you think it's like, oh, I've got to get that participation quiz. Your last gasp. Don't do that, please. I'll work with you. We don't want it spreading. Okay. No contagions. I take points off if you kill me. Okay. If you get me sick and I die, I'm going to deduct points. I'll write it in my will. Grade change. For that sorry SOB, you got me sick. No. All right. Any questions on the syllabus? And I know we ran through some of these things. I'm going to go back now, go to PowerPoint and go to Blackboard and look at these. All right. So, of course, on Blackboard, you go through course instructor, contact. And I put my contact lots of different places. The syllabus is several different places. Again, the syllabus, if you have any question, I'll make sure I go back in and put the actual correct syllabus on there. All right. So let's go under the required stuff. Okay. This is where, let me go back to make it look like the way it looks when you look at it. Okay. I hate Windows 10 because that thing pops out of the way. All right, so under exam 1 required stuff, again, there's just these two things now. Okay. The exam 1 objective quizzes. Okay. Chapter 15, excuse me, it's 202. Chapter 15 is open until Wednesday the 17th. Okay. Since we kind of started class a little bit, we started technically, school started yesterday. You guys had access to the site, but from that point on, almost all of the closing dates will be Sundays for the quizzes. There will be some other Wednesday closing dates for some of the essays and some of the other things, but pretty much everything I have Sunday as a closing date. Okay, that doesn't mean you have to wait till Sunday to do things or turn them in. Okay, something can happen. I'm a master procrastinator. Okay, so I know from experience, if you put things off, things can happen. Okay, and for the discussions and for the quizzes, essay deadlines, all the things that you're going to have plenty of time to work on. Okay, once the deadline is passed, unless you have just a, you're comatose for a month or something. Okay, I'll probably reopen a quiz for you. Anything short of that, again, right now you've got, for chapter 1 quiz and discussion, you've got 6 days. Okay, if Blackboard goes down at 11:10 p.m. on Wednesday, and you don't submit a discussion, and you don't submit the I don't know if I'll be, well, I won't say if Blackboard went down, I might extend a little bit. But if you just, if your internet goes out, or you get stuck in traffic, can't get back to home or something like that, then that's not you have plenty of time. And all these are open now. Okay? You could go do them today if you wanted to. Okay, but again, the way the objective quizzes work, excuse me. When you pull them up, they all come up at one time. And again, these are this just takes you through the text. Okay, these are basically just questions straight from their test bank that is connected to the text. So just read through the textbook. Which, by the way, I forgot to mention, this is the book we have to use. Okay, it's America: The Essential Learning Edition, Volume 2. There's no access code or anything connected to it right now. I'm not using Inquisitive this year. So if you have an older edition or a used one or whatever, that's fine. Okay, if you get one that, like this one, we loaned it and somebody already used the access code that came with it, because we used to some instructors still use Inquisitive. I don't right now. Okay, so there's no access code or anything, but you do need the text. So you'll just go through the book and answer these questions. Okay, if I were doing it, I'm old school. I'd probably copy and paste and have the questions on a sheet of paper, because I like paper, or at least I've got 2 screens. I'd pull one up. Pull it up and just look through the book and then answer the questions. And remember, you can only hit submit one time. Okay, so if I went through and said, okay, I'm going to say B here, C here, blah blah, answer a couple, go, I gotta go to work, or gotta go to dinner or something. You come down the bottom, I just hit save all answers. Okay, and they're saved. All right. Well, I'm not going to hit OK, but anyway, they'd be saved. So then you could come back before next Wednesday and work on them. Okay. But you can only hit save and submit one time. When you hit save and submit, it's going to give you the score. It's half a point each. They're 10 points, so 20 questions, 10 points each. Okay. So all this is taking you through the text. So read the text, answer the questions. You've got the text. You can make sure all the answers are right. When you know all the answers are right, submit them. Okay. And that gets you 10 points. All right. So with the quizzes, again, you can only hit that save and submit one time. Okay. So don't forget that. All right, I'm going to go back out of that. Then the discussion, I just have a discussion board post right here connected. It just takes you to the class discussion board. Again, this is, for some reason I can't get that. I wanted that first. Anyway, it just tells you kind of how to post. So here's where you can do the class introduction. I've already added one there. Make sure anytime you're adding a post, hit create a thread. Okay, so whether it's here or in the chapter post, you hit create a thread. Put introduction right here and introduce yourself the way I asked you to, or later if it's chapter 15, so forth and so on. Because you got to create that thread, so that's the way it shows up where I can grade you. Okay, so make sure you create your own thread. All right, and so all those are, you can go through the required stuff, or you can just click on the tab on the left. But again, the deadlines are posted here as well. So same thing, discussion for chapter 15 next Wednesday the 17th, and then everything else is going to be Sundays. Okay. Any questions on the reading quiz and the discussions? All right. And again, a couple of discussion questions, they ask you specifically about some information that's in the text. So And now some of it actually you can also find it online when it asks you to read part of the Thinking Like an Historian. Well, I don't have those posted there, but I think you might be able to find that on the book website that they have a connection to. But everything you need for the first 4 chapters is all just straight from the text. Okay. In later chapters, I might have a little document posted or a video or something like that that you watch. But everything right now to start with comes from the text. Okay. All right, then back over to the, and then as far as the terms, PowerPoints, other study tools that the publisher provides is up under study tools. And remember, there are no graded assignments in study tools. Okay, so nothing under study tools counts toward your grade, even if it happens to show up somewhere in my grades. Blackboard is quirky. I've tried as hard as I can to zero all that stuff out and not have it show up, but it may still show up. Okay, if you take one of these review quizzes, okay, so if I pull it up here and I go under chapter 15 and decide to take a review quiz, which I strongly recommend, they don't count for anything. They don't count for you or against you, but I strongly recommend you using them to prepare and learn the information. But if something happens to show up on one of these in your My Grades, don't worry about it. They don't count for anything. Okay, I have a column that I control where everything that counts goes into this thing called total earned. Okay, I've tried to delete even the total column, but apparently it won't let me do that. Okay, so still some people get to say, well, because again, I have some things that you can do extra. That's not, some of it may, especially if you do all the participation, not all those points go in there. Okay, so I handle total earned. So at the end of the semester, I take the total points earned and divide by total possible. And I believe again in the class I have to look back at the number when I get the right I think I have it here. I just didn't list it. Yeah. So the total possible is going to be 850 points. So again, more than half of the course is open book, open take home stuff. Whatever. So at the end of the term, I calculate total earned divided by 850, and that's your score, your percentage. All right. So nothing under study tools counts for you or against you, but I strongly recommend using, again, under each chapter, there's there's outline, there's a little, the author has these little videos introducing the topic. That's he's a really sharp guy. And then, like I said, these chapter quizzes for this exam, they're up under those each chapter. Go back to the exam one study. There we go. And then down below here, I have the terms and my PowerPoints. Okay, and then also these are course lectures. Actually, this is from a couple semesters ago. If I record lectures, I'll post the current ones that we're doing for this class. But this is in case you happen to miss something. Either you can look under a folder that'll be this semester's lectures, or you can look back at an old one if you happen to miss a day or something like that. So again, the study tools tab, very useful but not required. Okay, but I strongly recommend using it. But nothing counts under there. Other things that was where you'll go and take the exams. Eventually, we'll talk about. You want to make sure you learn about Lockdown Browser Monitor, and then go in and take that little practice test. And I'll remind you that probably later in the week or next week. You need to take the practice and make sure you can do it well before you take the exam. Okay. If the first time you try to download Lockdown Browser and use a webcam is while you're taking the exam at like 11 o'clock on that Sunday night, the 4th, I'm not going to be very sympathetic if it doesn't work. Okay. And remember, I'm not required to give you any makeup for anything. Don't think instructors are required to, if you just miss something or miss class, whatever, go, oh, I need to make that up. I'm not required to. The only thing I'm required would be if I gave an in-class exam. One day I gave it in an exam and you had a school-related excuse. You're on an athletic team or the choir or something and you missed that exam that was only offered that one day. Then I'm required to give you makeup. But I don't do that, right? So there's nothing in this class, number one, besides the exams, nothing can be made up because there's no making up to do. You have it, it's there, there's deadlines, you just have to get it done. Deadline passes, it passes. Had a couple people last semester had at least B averages on exams that just refused to do any of their work. I mean, made B's on the exams, but did like a tenth of the reading quizzes, did maybe one discussion, and they failed. No, oh, I made B on my exam. I said, but you didn't do anything else. I don't, so again, sorry. I slept fine. It's not my. When I first started teaching, I'd feel bad if I'd say if I had to give somebody a bad grade, and I realized, wait a minute, I'm not giving any grades. You earn a grade, right? So, just make sure, do things ahead of time. Make sure that you can do lockdown browser and monitor well ahead of the actual exams. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let me go back and see what else is up here. And of course, my grade check announcements all the time. I post a lot of announcements. I post a lot of reminders. There's a lot of tools there. I'm going to actually get rid of that one. You don't need that. And then I do offer opportunities for extra points a lot. One thing that I have set is the book review. You can read about that. I'll set a deadline. Usually it's the second exam. That's when you have to get a book approved, and then you submit the book review by the end of the term. That's worth up to 15 extra points. I'll probably, again, I haven't talked to the international folks. I don't know what their need is for conversation partners. I know there's a few people that took advantage of that last year. If they need conversation partners, I'll offer that as an alternative to the book review. And then I'll probably do what I did last semester. Well, I'll post some of the other quizzes, like the primary source quizzes and things like that, for some extra points. Maybe not as much as I did last time. I think I posted like 40 points last time. I'm getting soft in my old age. Anyway, but then also I will bribe you to attend things. Okay, there's stuff going on campus that I think is interesting, especially a lot of things that are connected with the international program. Then college is about getting exposed to different things, different ideas, different cultures, that kind of thing. And we're blessed at Gadsden State. There aren't any other community colleges that have a language program, have the language institute like we have. And so very few community colleges have the international student population we have. And so we're very fortunate in that. In fact, I wouldn't want to teach here if we didn't have that all these years. It would be too bland. I know in the spring, the big thing in the spring we have is the International Festival. It'll be in March. I believe the date, don't hold me to it, but I'll remind you of it. It's like March 9th, I think. It's going to be over at the place called, I think they call it's either 210 or 310 on the tracks. The city owns it's not the convention hall this year. But it's right downtown Gadsden. Really, really cool thing. I'll bribe you to attend. You don't have to buy a ticket to just attend and go see all the displays from all the different countries and everything. But if you're going to go, you may as well go ahead and buy a ticket to eat the food. The food's good too. So it's like usually, I think $8 or $9 for a student or something like that. So most people who go because I bribed them end up commenting how interesting it was, and I see a lot of former students who end up bringing their kids and that kind of thing. So there'll be other events here and there that I'll bribe you to attend. If you're able to go, great. If you're not, I'm sorry. But like I said, I'll also offer some things online that you can do for extra points. Okay. And let me say, the extra points, take advantage of those things. Every semester, I'll have, if you're borderline at the end of the term, again, I take your total earned, divide by 850. Let's say you got a 59.2. Okay, what grade is that? 59.2. Anybody know? That's an F, right? Because one thing I know in math, I can round. I know how to round. That's about all I know how to do in math. I can add a little bit and round. Okay, I was a hell of a third grade champion in rounding, I think. Anyway. So yeah, that rounds, because I do round, but that rounds to a 59. Okay, so if it's a 69 or a 79 or 89 or whatever. So I go back and look. Okay, I'll look at things. If this is a in-class class, I'll look at attendance. We don't require attendance, but I'll look at attendance. I'll look at, like those guys, the people I talked about this last semester. If you did, a couple of them had like 20 points out of 150 possible for reading quizzes. Well, that tells me you don't give a damn. What's the only other explanation? if you don't even attempt 13 out of 15 reading quizzes that are open book and you can take a month to work on? That tells me you don't give a damn. And so as I always tell people, and you need to learn this, instructors, bosses, people you're going to be asking for jobs, that kind of stuff. But all the instructors I know here anyway, if we think you give a damn, I'll give a damn. I love students. I want you to do well, okay? But if I think you don't give a damn, I got 200 some other students I want to give a damn about, okay? So I don't care. I mean, if you're not going to care, why should I care? Okay. Now, if you have issues, if there's problems, communicate with me. Okay. I pretend to be, don't. It's one of the bad things about spring semester when you have a lot of former students. Usually the first day I try to scare the hell out of people. And so most of y'all, of course, most of y'all were in the good classes. Don't tell the other people y'all were in the good class anyway. But I'll work with you if I know. Again, I know you're working hard. I'll bend over backwards to do the best I can to work with you. Okay. But at the end of the day, if there's those borderline grades, okay, you earn what you earn. Now, if I see that you had great attendance, you did everything you could, and then I see even you did stuff for extra points, whether it's the book review or the extra quizzes I put on or whatever, and I go, man, because my assumption is everyone's going to try their hardest. And so, look, sometimes people, the reason why I put all these other things on there, some people don't take exams well. Okay, I struggle with test anxiety and stuff like that. I never tested well. Okay, so I mean, I had a crappy ACT, and if I hadn't had football, I wouldn't have gotten a scholarship. But I have a PhD. I mean, tests don't always show what you're capable of, right? I mean, that's why I tell people. I know ACTs now, coming out of high school. I mean, I preach that with my kids, and thankfully my daughter could test really well and scored a really high ACT and earned academic scholarships. But my son, not so much. Okay, fortunately he came here then and earned scholarships. Yay, Gadsden State, right? But so anyway, so I do this. So I know. So if you try really hard and maybe you don't do so well on the exams, but you do all this other stuff and you're borderline, then I'm going to say, you know what? They've done everything they could do, and they even did extra. So I feel justified in bumping them up to that next grade. Okay, so again, make sure take advantage of all this opportunity. Okay, but especially everything that's required. Again, if you don't do the extra points, you are not going to be harmed in any way. I won't take anything away from you. That's all optional. Okay, but all the quizzes and discussions, I mean, put the time into it. Make sure you do them. Okay. Now I don't have posted on here yet. Sometimes I will. Last semester, there wasn't any problem. It's actually maybe I've gotten a reputation over 21 years, I guess. But, for my in-class courses, okay, there's certain etiquette I expect. Okay, we have a thing on there about netiquette. Of course, if you're responding, I encourage people to respond to discussion posts. I'm not requiring this time. Sometimes I'll have that where you get like 10 points for a post and 5 points for a response. I'm not requiring, but I encourage you to discuss. And while we're in class, we're going to discuss some of these discussion posts. Okay, so I require people to be respectful of each other. Okay, but as far as that goes in class, okay, if I'm lecturing, again, I joke about the reason why I have the blinds closed, not only just for there's no sun or anything today, but I am focus challenged. Okay. I was ADD before they knew what that was. When I was growing up, they'd beat the crap out of me all the time. I got paddlings every single day, every class. Every teacher had a paddle, and I just got the crap beat out of me all the time. And I still couldn't sit still and keep my mouth shut. It would drive me crazy. I remember going to church, and I'd move all the time, and my dad would like twist my ears and pinch my, whatever, and then like whip me on the way out. I mean, I just couldn't help it. Okay, so same thing here. If I'm lecturing, don't do anything that would distract me or somebody next to you. If everybody shows up, it's a pretty full class. If I'm lecturing, I'm giving you information that you need to know for the exam. So don't distract the other person. And I can maybe even use this. This can be an open question for my ones that had my class. If any of you are wondering, what's the one thing I can do to really piss Dr. Dobbs off? I mean, if we really want to see him angry, what's the one thing you can do when I'm lecturing? Anybody want to remember from last semester? Texting in my class. If I see, I don't have my phone with me, but if I see this, I don't know. Again, as I always say, I know I probably need medication and counseling and all that kind of stuff, but it is an irrational response. To me, you could just do like this to me, and it wouldn't be as disrespectful as doing this. I swear. You can sleep as long as you don't snore or drool. I don't care. Sure, snore, I'll throw something at you. You drool, I'll go, come on, whatever. But this, for some reason, I don't know, like I said, I'm just an old fart. I have issues. I need some counseling, whatever. But I swear it pisses me off to no end. Because to me, what it's saying is just extremely disrespectful to do that in any setting. Okay. So I have a rule, and I'll post it to make sure you understand. I have a 2 strikes and you're out. Okay. The first time, I'll say, get the hell out of my class. And as you're leaving, I'll say, open up. You'll have an open note. Open note quiz, 1 question, maybe 20-point quiz or something for participation. Not to punish you, but just to reward the people for obeying. Maybe I'm a little sarcastic and vindictive. But the first time I throw you out, you get to come back. Okay, I haven't had to throw anybody out lately. I'm glad. And of course, it's probably not even text anymore. I'd be Snapchatting or doing whatever. It's like I get on my son all the time. I know I sound older and older every day, but I'm like every time we go somewhere to eat, it's like it's a damn cheeseburger. Okay, everybody in the world's seen a cheeseburger and fries, or okay, I know it's In-N-Out in LA, or whatever. I thought, why do you have to show your food? Anyway, I don't get it. Anyway, I'm just glad we didn't have phones when I was growing up because the statute of limitations hadn't run out on something. Anyway, but so again, the second time I throw you out, you're gone for good. Okay? I don't give a damn if it's after the last day of withdrawal. I don't give a damn if you fail. I don't care. I don't care. It's not high school. I don't send you a damn principal. I don't write a damn pink slip. I don't take up your phone. But if you don't obey my rules, I'll throw your ass out. And I can have security here backing me up. Okay? So don't test me on it. Okay? The former students can know I want to have fun. I want to enjoy class. I want to laugh, talk about stuff, whatever. But that to me, that's the most disrespectful thing you can do. So don't test me on it because I will throw you out. Okay? And again, if it's after drop an ad, you drop below and lose your insurance, shouldn't have been texting or Snapchatting. Okay? If you can't go an hour and 15 minutes without doing something doing that. Now again, I want you taking notes. I prefer, and actually if you can, writing your notes. There's actually scientific studies show writing notes actually helps you retain things better. Typing is next best. I'm actually going to say if you need to use a different device than a phone to take notes or do anything with the class. Because the last couple semesters, seen this and go, oh, well, I'm looking at Blackboard or something, which I don't go and check, but I'm still, it just, something in me that thing turns on, and I get pissed off, I get distracted, and so if you're going to use a device, it can be an iPad, it can be a computer, whatever, but it needs to be up on the table and like you're typing. Okay, if I see you doing like this, I'm going to throw you out. Okay, I don't care what it is. Now, if there's some kind of emergency, like you're waiting on as one of my former colleagues used to say, if you're waiting on word that your organ is there for the transplant or something, whatever, well then maybe you don't need to be in class that day, and that's fine. Okay, or if and again, I don't even mind. Sometimes people leave phones on and they ring. I know I'm okay. I mean, I understand. Just turn that off as quick as you can. That's not your fault. But doing this again, as I said, I know I need some deep therapy and medication, probably more liquor. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, but so any other questions? I know I rambled there a little bit. I always do. Any other questions about any of the requirements? I'm trying to think what else is up there. Any questions about the quizzes or any of the requirements, things like that? Okay. And one thing I might do, I haven't figured out exactly how to do this yet, but for those who are able to take notes, I want you taking notes. Okay. In fact, one of the things I might do for participation is do some note checking. Like in math, they'll do like a spot homework check thing sometimes. So I might say, have you taken notes today? And that might be your participation that day. And even if you were there, you didn't take notes. And again, if you're not able to take notes, and that's fine, if through student support or whatever. But if you're able to, and you're not, then that means you're not there that day. You didn't get the credit for the participation. So take notes. Okay. When I'm lecturing, you need to learn that practice. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and transition to covering a few terms, give a little background, because we're always so rushed at the end. I want to make sure I take advantage of the time. Now, for those of you who haven't had my class before, again, I would recommend printing out the list of terms. This is what you're going to be required. Again, whether or not I covered in lecture, Then you got your text, review quizzes, and other things to kind of fill in there. But when I'm lecturing, if I'm going to be talking about some things you need to know about that term, I'll usually try to say it a little slower and kind of give you the information. Also, of course, I tell a lot of stories. I try to connect, anecdotes and stories and whatnot. Try to make it a little less painful learning history. But let me just go ahead and see where's my. So, of course, this is the text. Some of the things we're going to talk about just today. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges. Big thing first, I'm going to talk some background to what we're going to talk about, which is Reconstruction. So these are some of the core objectives we'll talk about as we move along in the chapter here. Okay. So first of all, what we're going to deal with first is something called Reconstruction. And Reconstruction, of course, is the why. Of course, we're talking about reconstructing the country or putting the Union, putting the country together. Why was there a need for Reconstruction? What had just happened? What was in the process of happening between 1861 and 65? Civil War, right? So the context of Reconstruction is the Civil War. Now, I know sometimes people say, oh, I don't like history. It's just a bunch of, cold facts and figures and dates and that kind of stuff. And it kind of seems like that. Like, if you pick up a history book or something and go, well, it's just a bunch of information. It's just all in there. Well, understand this history, this information wasn't history when it was happening, right? It was what was going on. And people make history, right? People who are fallible, who are flawed like all of us. I hate to break it to you, but I know every single one of you guys have issues, okay? Y'all aren't perfect, okay? None of us are. And so when we talk about in a minute, when we talk about Reconstruction policy and the political arguments up in Washington, that seem like, oh, so what, they're talking about politics. No, think about the background of this, okay? The background is the greatest catastrophe ever in American history, the Civil War. The greatest catastrophe ever. Okay, nothing has happened in American history to compare even remotely to what happens in the Civil War, as far as loss of life, devastation, that kind of thing. Okay, the one number I might ask you to know, okay, is 640,000. They've actually amended this number upward some. It's actually, I want actually to know it. You can take this note now just so you remember this. It's closer to 700,000, they think now. They've kind of amended some numbers and added some death by disease and some other things. So let's just round up here and say I'll say 700,000. Either number is a big number. Okay, that's the number of Americans killed in the Civil War. Okay, either by in combat or disease, which predominantly disease. Now that's a huge number, right? That's think of if you go to let's say you go to Auburn, Alabama football game on a Saturday, about how many people are in the stadium? 90 to 100, 80, 90, 100,000. Okay, so talking about 6 or 7 stadiums full of people. Okay, a lot of people. What's the population of anybody happen to know the population of Gadsden? About 35,000. The population of Birmingham is about 400,000. So you could combine, and I think Mobile is about the same. You could combine Mobile and Birmingham and say all of the people that live there die in 4 years. Okay, so you start kind of putting that in perspective. Now, even greater perspective, this thing that really blows your mind. This was close to 700,000 in the 1860s. Our total population was barely 50 million. Anybody know what the American population is today, give or take? Actually, a little more than that now. I think it's up to like close to like 350 or so now. Anyway, it's a lot. It's over 300 million. Okay, so when you adjust for population, you're talking about what if over the next 4 years, I think that it's pushing more like 5 or 6 million Americans died. Think about that for a second. Every household, every town, every village, every city in the country would be impacted by that death. Now, when you add to that too, remember, for those of you talking about 201 class, if you were wounded in battle, what was typically the prescription for you? So if you were shot in the arm or the leg, amputation. I saw a thing today. I hadn't read back through this book for 202 in a year or so. I was just glancing through the first part. They talked about in 1866, the state of Mississippi, a fifth of their entire state budget was on prosthesis type things for amputees. So you're talking about millions, even back during this period of time, millions of men sitting in every town and village and hamlet in the country without arms, without legs, whatever the case may be. So there was a daily, every single day reminder. There were families that lost multiple sons, husbands and multiple sons in the war. Okay, so when you start, and again, the devastation. This is a picture of this is Richmond. But if we had, if this was the 20th century, and we had documentary footage, Richmond, New Orleans, Atlanta, Savannah, Columbia, some of the bigger cities in the South looked a lot like, we'll see video later in World War II of some of the German cities and European cities. Bombed out, burned out, railroads destroyed, crops destroyed. It'd be 20-something years before agricultural production reaches the 1860 level again. So absolute death. And remember, more Northerners died than Southerners. So this wasn't just like Southerners saw this death and destruction. More Northerners died than Southerners. Okay, so when we start talking about cold Reconstruction policy debates in Congress, no, there's almost all of those people, or many of them, had lost sons, had lost family members. There's a lot of hurt, anger, pain, all those kind of things. Okay, so you have to kind of remember that sometimes when we're talking about policy and politics and things like that. There's a lot of emotion always connected with those things. Okay, all right. So what I'm gonna look at real quick is this first section I call presidential reconstruction. Again, your text does a good job of kind of talking a little bit about more of the background here. But let me just talk about this. So again, the United States government, even in the midst of the Civil War, really starting as early as late 61 and early 62. So we're talking about the first year or two of the war. Lincoln, who was the president, and his cabinet start talking about how we're going to put the country back together. Okay, how are we going to reconstruct the country? Well, one of the things your book mentions here is there's going to be an argument between the president and the Republicans in Congress. And understand, when I put up here Republican more aims, the Republican Party dominated the U.S. government during this period of time. Okay, remember the Democrat Party had been the party of the Confederacy. There were still Democrats in Congress up north, and there were even some pro-war Democrats. But for the most part, Lincoln was a Republican, obviously, and his cabinet was Republican. The Congress was a majority Republican. So when you're looking at, when I put up here war aims, what I mean by aim is, what do you want to get out of something? What's your aim in this, right? And so when they start talking about how we're going to reconstruct the country, it was the Republicans who were debating about, well, what do we want to get out of it? When we win this war eventually, because there was an assumption it would happen eventually. Now, it was closer than people thought, primarily because of bumbling leadership in the military. But when we win eventually, how do we put the country back together? Okay, and the debate broke down between, on the one side were the radical Republicans, and on the other side what we call moderate Republicans. Okay, radical Republicans, which your text talks a good bit about, and I have them on the list there. These were guys like Thaddeus Stevens and Charles Sumner. If you watch, again, I love historically based movies. I've mentioned several times. A few years back, there was a movie called Lincoln with Daniel Day-Lewis playing Lincoln. And if you don't know who Daniel Day-Lewis is, he's probably one of the great actors of the modern era. But that whole movie was based on just the fight for the 13th Amendment. Okay, but in there, Thaddeus Stevens is a key character in that movie too. But the radical Republicans, these were guys or people who tended to be from the abolitionist background. So remember, Republican Party was the third and final anti-slavery party when it was founded in the 1850s. And so the core of that abolitionist movement that helped found the Republican Party, that's the radicals. So these were people like Stevens who as a result of the war and in Reconstruction, they wanted to basically completely restructure the South. They wanted to, break up all the plantations. In fact, he would have preferred, jailing all the elites who created the Confederacy, creating a kind of a country of small farmers. Of course, obviously doing away with slavery. Protecting former slaves, guaranteeing them political and civil rights, but essentially fighting for equality for former slaves. And the big thing that radicals wanted too is they wanted to punish the South. They wanted to punish at least the wealthy of the South. So if you use the analogy, I like using it like a sports analogy. Most of you probably seen the high jump, right? Like the Olympics and stuff like that. They run up and jump over the bar. It's amazing how high they can get up there now. I'd probably have to fall over one, but I guess okay. But if you use the analogy of like a high jump, say okay, if the southern states are going to have to jump over this bar to get back into the Union, the radicals wanted it. I don't know what the world record is nowadays. It's probably up over 8 feet. I'm sure they wanted like a 10-foot bar. Okay, they wanted it nearly impossible for the southern states to get over the bar. In other words, they had to change everything. Okay? So the radicals wanted to guarantee political and civil rights for former slaves, and they wanted to make it hard on the South to get back in. Hard meaning they had to do all the things the radicals wanted to do, guaranteeing those political and civil rights, breaking up plantations, those kind of things. Now, if you weren't a radical, you were pretty much just in the moderate camp. The moderate Republicans would be those who say, and it was kind of an argument of chicken and the egg, right? Everybody heard that analogy before? What comes first, the chicken and the egg? Does you have to have the chicken to have the egg, or do you have to have the egg to have, that kind of thing? Well, same thing here. The moderates would say, well, we may agree with the radicals that we want to do some of the things that you're talking about doing. Political and civil rights, former slaves, and breaking up plantations, land reform, land redistribution was going to be a big thing we'll talk about later. And what do you do with these 4 million people who've been enslaved? What do they do for work? That kind of stuff. The moderates would say, well, okay, those are maybe good ideas, but let's just get the country back together first. So their idea would be, let's just do whatever we can to mend the wounds, get the country back together. Then we'll get the Southerners to do the things we want to do. Okay, so that was kind of the difference of opinion there. All right. Well, the Congress, from the very beginning, the radicals in Congress argued that they should be in charge of Reconstruction, because in that point they say if the South claims to be an enemy country, when you deal with war with a country, then when it comes to kind of a treaty and organizing the peace, then really it's congressional responsibility. They're the ones that declare war. They're the ones that sign off on treaties and that kind of stuff. Well, Lincoln said, no. He never really admitted, at least consistently, that that the Confederacy was ever a separate country. He said there are always American states. You just had people within those states in rebellion. So he looked at it in the sense of, since these are just American states already, and we're just looking at how to end this rebellion, then he said that's the president's responsibility. So Lincoln was going to take in that approach. Lincoln initiates a plan for Reconstruction, and again, they couldn't wait till 1865 and the war's over. Every time they took territory in the South, when they took Tennessee and Louisiana and so forth, they had to figure out, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to let these states come back in? Okay, so Lincoln's approach became known as the 10% plan. Okay, the 10% plan. See if I have a copy of this thing real quick. Let me read you this real quick. This is something I forgot I had it in these notes. I couldn't find it when I was at the end of 201. Lincoln's known. He's one of the great speakers in our history. He's probably best. How many have ever been to the Lincoln Memorial in Washington? Okay, I hadn't been in years and years, and I think I actually lived in. This is awful. I lived in D.C. for a few years, and I don't even think I ever went to the Lincoln Memorial when I was living there. When I was working in politics, but I remember as a kid going. But I'd forgotten until this last Thanksgiving we were up there, and I'd forgotten there in Lincoln Memorial they've got two speeches. A speech engraved on one wall and a speech engraved on the other one. Probably his most famous speech was engraved on this side. What's the most famous speech by Lincoln? Gettysburg Address, okay, 77 years ago, that kind of, okay. Now, the other one, though, on this other side, anybody remember what that speech was if you went to Lincoln Memorial? It was his second inaugural address, okay, which it's not very long, but think about it. He was inaugurated in 1864 in March. So you're talking about there probably already been, close to 500, maybe 400,000 or 500,000 men killed. The war was going on and on. Remember, from 201, a lot of people didn't even think he'd get reelected. Imagine that. We got a memorial for this guy, a big monument, and literally a month or two out from the election, nobody gave him a chance of being reelected because the war was going so badly. A couple of victories, Atlanta, Mobile, gave him a little boost, and he ends up getting reelected. Well, as you can imagine, if you're being inaugurated as president and you're in the midst of the worst catastrophe ever in American history, you're probably going to talk about that. And if you get a chance to read it, I won't read the whole thing, but he basically goes through and says, this is why I believe we have the war. Because people are saying, why has this happened to America? Why are so many people dying? Why is this happening? And his view was, this was God's judgment on America. That for whatever reason, we didn't get rid of slavery when we had the opportunity. And remember, from my 201 class, remember there were people who stood up in the Constitutional Convention and said, if we're creating a constitutional government, a republican form of government, a democracy, we need to get rid of slavery. But the southern states said no. Okay, so he warned, right? That guy in that 1787 said, if you don't deal with it now, God will deal with it down the road. So Lincoln agreed with that. Lincoln said, this is God's judgment on America. And so he said, I hope it ends soon. But God's judgments are eternal and true. He said, if there's more blood that needs to be shed by the sword to make up for all the blood shed by the lash, or more lives have to be lost to pay for all the lives lost in slavery, so be it. God is sovereign. Okay, so pretty powerful, stuff. Okay, now at the end, I want to read the last statement, and this is you can kind of get an idea of whether or not he was going to take a radical approach in Reconstruction or a moderate approach. He said, quote, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we're in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, and to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. Does that sound like he's going to take a radical approach, harsh approach, or a moderate approach? Moderate approach, okay? And so Lincoln comes out with something called, it becomes known as the 10% plan. Okay, the 10% plan. What that comes from is that as southern states, let's say when Alabama wants to be readmitted to the Union. Now, parts of it, he did call on, he basically was going to issue blanket pardons for everybody, except for, there were a few exceptions, like if you'd been a political official in the United States or a military official in the United States, because then if you went up, then you went and fought for the Confederacy or was a Confederate official, you basically committed treason, right? Because when you're sworn into the military, you're sworn into Congress, you swear to uphold the Constitution. So he exempted them. They weren't going to be able to serve and things, but there wasn't like mass hangings or crimes against humanity type stuff, but what he said was, so now if Alabama wanted to be readmitted to the Union, they had to come up with a new constitution, state constitution, and then apply to Congress to be readmitted to the Union. Well, to do that, all he said that would have to happen was that just 10% of the eligible voters in a given state had to vote for, going back into the Union. 10%, okay? Basically saying we're going to turn away from the Confederate Articles of Confederation and all that stuff, and we're going to go back with the United States. Well, 10% is not a very big number, right? I'm not very good at math, but out of 100%, right? If like I said, if you have 100% exam, you don't want to go, hey, I made 10%, woo, 10%, baby, double figures. That's where I was in math. I made 21 one time on an algebra exam, and 22 on a 9th grade algebra exam. I took it home and showed my dad because it's the only time I made double figures. Right. Not very good math. I made 9 on the math part in ACT, by the way. I drew my initials, like, and made little, I just colored in dots because I had no clue. Anyway, but they passed me. I made a B in algebra. Isn't that terrible? So I could have used it maybe down the road. I don't know. But anyway, so 10% is not much. I mean, you could easily, remember when people voted whether or not to secede in most states, it was a very close vote. So you could have easily found 10%. Okay. So the radicals in Congress, cried bloody murder. They said, what the hell? I mean, 10%. That's nothing. So there was a proposal called the Wade Davis bill, known for a couple of, one guy's name, one guy named Wade Davis. These were both very prominent radical Republican members of Congress. And they proposed in Congress, and it passed both houses of Congress. Okay. Lincoln, he didn't veto it. He did what we call pocket vetoing. It came to his desk within 10 days of the end of a session, and he just ignored it. Which, if he didn't sign it or do anything, it just dies. But what this did, the Wade Davis bill, it was an attempt to toughen up Lincoln's 10% plan. And what they did, at minimum, they said it needs to be at least 50%. At least say there's a majority of the people in the state who say, okay, we don't want to be in the Confederacy anymore. We want to go back and be in the United States and swear allegiance to the United States. Well, again, it passed both houses of Congress, but Lincoln vetoed it. But it showed this fight that would continue until Lincoln died. This fight between the radical approach and the moderate approach. Now, one thing that does happen that's very important, and coming out of the Reconstruction era, there's going to be 3 very important constitutional amendments, the first being the 13th Amendment. Okay? Remember, during the war, Lincoln had issued the Emancipation Proclamation. It was very shaky legally. Okay? It only applied to slaves who were in rebel-held territory. He even questioned whether he had the right to do it in the first place. It didn't apply to all the slaves who were in Union-held territory. There's lots of issues. There were already legal challenges. He knew the only way that this war could really finally end up ending slavery was with a constitutional amendment. So again, that movie I mentioned, it's all about the fighting for this 13th Amendment. Well, they finally get it. Okay, so the 13th Amendment ends slavery once and for all in the United States. Now, of course, there's some loopholes, like where it says except for essentially incarceration for a crime, which for the next century or more, and maybe others would argue even longer, but for the better part of a century, especially here in the South, people of color were always, we know now millions of young black men over the decades were just rounded up, arrested for no reason. They'd be put in prison and then leased out to farms and factories. So it was slavery in all but name, really, what it was. But technically speaking, slavery ends with the 13th Amendment. But then, of course, we'll never know what Lincoln would have done. I'm sure you guys talk about this all the time sitting around the dinner table. What would Lincoln have done with Reconstruction if he had not been assassinated? I'm sure you guys talk about it all the time. It's one of the things historians talk about all the time. I like to think of, again, I use a sports analogy. I've been involved in games that we've won very, very close games or lost very close. We didn't lose much when I was playing, but if you lose on a last-second play or a last-second field goal or something like that in football, or a last-second three-pointer from half court in basketball, for the rest of your life you're going to go, man, we should have won that game. But if you lose like 66-0, or you get beat by 60 in basketball or something like that, it's pretty hard to say, man, we were this close. No, you feel beaten. So some historians say, the South was destroyed. The South was utterly vanquished. Okay, and so if Lincoln had been that one voice in Reconstruction, maybe things would have gone easier. We don't know. Okay, but of course he's assassinated. So again, we're going to end up having to deal with this guy named Andrew Johnson. I'll go ahead and stop there. I'm assuming the clock's right, so hopefully I didn't keep it long. I don't know if I did or not. Is it slow? So remember, hey, get started on your. So remember, anything we covered today, there could be a quiz Tuesday. Okay. Get started on your